Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Sports Talk Philadelphia here on LaSalle TV. I'm your host, Tyler Harper. We've got a great show for you here today, as we always do. At least I'd like to think so. And with that comes a great panel. We've got Tommy McIntyre, Kevin Cook, and Steve Graham Jr. returning to the desk. Welcome back, Steve.
I like how you use Junior.
It's on the lower third, too. Just wait. But anyway, junior, senior, whatever orientation of your name you are aside, let's go to the Philadelphia Flyers. Let's start there. There might be some trouble in Flyer land right now, as Craig Berube, there are reports that his job may not be the safest in the world. Let's look at his stats so far, as he's 72, 56, and 26 as Flyers head coach. Basically there for full 2 seasons because, of course, last year taking over after Peter Laviolette fired after 3 games. So with that in mind, and with Ed Snider making these kind of decisions before, guys, is it too soon to fire Craig Berube, or do you think that maybe change might be needed?
I think it's a little too soon to probably fire him. I mean, I think Ed Snider is a guy that definitely wants to win now. I think he's in that mode all the time. And I think Ron Hextall is a different type of mindset. He probably wants to think, we can hold off on this. We have to still develop some players that we have in the system right now, because we might not just have the guys that are really ready to compete at the highest level we have right now. And I think Ron Hextall is trying to think in that mode, like, we can take our time, build to the future. I think we're going to think Berube's going to be a coach that can help these guys along. But, I mean, I think it's definitely probably, in Ed Snider's mind, it's definitely probably an option.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit too early to fire him. He's only been here, as you said, 2 years. The team isn't really as good as it can be, and I think that's kind of what Hextall came here to do, to bring pieces up from your farm system and through the draft, and that's what they really want to do. So firing him, I think, counteracts what Hextall wants.
Steve, there's been some reports of maybe some contention, quote unquote, between the locker room and Hextall. I mean, nothing obviously confirmed, but with that in mind, do you think maybe that Berube has lost the locker room, or do you think there may be still time for him to take it back?
I think he has lost the locker room. You got to understand that Hextall inherited Berube when he came in, and after that Calgary game where Steve Mason was benched after 2 goals he let in, well, Steve Mason's been standing on his head between the pipes this year, like .922 save percentage, and he hasn't had the greatest defense in front of him. But when you lose a locker room in the NHL, they're a pretty close-knit group, and it's hard to get them back. So hopefully if Berube is going to be fired, which I think he is, it's in the offseason and not another 3 games and then get him out.
Yeah, I think if he was fired, I think, at least I hope that would be the case. Again, of course, not a la Peter Laviolette. But if he does come back this year, I mean, how close to the hot seat do you guys think he would be? Because this past week, Ed Snider came out and said, Kevin kind of mentioned before the show about how kind of going against the Ron Hextall patience approach, how he's got these young prospects. Ed Snider, as Tommy, as you said earlier, he wants to win next season. He thinks the pieces are in place, and he thinks this team is ready to be a contender next season. So if Berube does come back next year, how close to the hot seat do you think he's actually going to be, since Ed Snider wants us to go to the Cup again?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always definitely the mindset of Philadelphia to win now. I think Flyers have one of the most loyal fan bases in the city, I would say, and the fans themselves want to win, obviously. I think he'll probably be on the hot seat. I mean, obviously, if they're going into the year, they make some solid moves. Maybe they think we can make a playoff push. He's definitely going to be on the hot seat. I mean, obviously, we saw with Peter Laviolette that they weren't afraid to fire him 4 games in the season. So, obviously, I mean, this franchise is – they're hungry for a Stanley Cup. It's been so many years since they got one, so I think anything's probably possible right now.
I see it as if they bring him back, then he's here for the season. I don't think it's Hextall's way to fire a coach mid-season, even though, as we've seen, that is the way that Snider likes to do it sometimes. It does bring the locker room up and makes the players play a little bit harder.
That's what happened when Peter Laviolette came here his first year. Yeah. John Stevens got fired towards mid-season, and Peter Laviolette came in, and they made the Stanley Cup Finals. So, Steve, I mean, if Berube does come back, how hot is his seat really going to be?
Oh, she is very hot. And when he took over the team from Peter Laviolette, you know, the Flyers weren't the greatest, and he had a lot of work. But I like looking at that interview with Jimmy Rollins the other day where he talked about Philadelphia sports. And, you know, 11-year veteran here, he knows a lot. Even talking about the Flyers is the fact that, you know, when the Flyers were once good, the fans expect them to just keep being good. Like, we're not really ones for the rebuilding period, even though you look at the Sixers right now. But if Berube's back, there's a lot of pressure on them to make the playoffs. They've missed it the past 2 years, so Flyers fans want to see some success.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what happens. But there has been a name that's been already kind of thrown around that if Craig Berube gets fired. And let's take a look. Babcock, excuse me, of the Detroit Red Wings. It's hot up here. I have a dry throat right now. 454 wins, 219 losses, and 103 overtime losses with Detroit. I mean, obviously he's been there a few years. Won a Stanley Cup with Detroit in 2007, 2008. 2 gold medals with Team Canada. But his contract expires at the end of the season, and a lot of people are wondering whether or not he's going to come back. And if he hits the free agent market, he's going to have a big price tag. But honestly, I wouldn't put it past Ed Snyder to maybe fire Craig Berube and open up that checkbook. Would you guys want to see Mike Babcock be the Flyers' new head coach?
I mean, you have a track record there. I mean, obviously you saw the Stanley Cup win in 07-08 season. I mean, but we had a guy that won a Stanley Cup before, and Peter Laviolette. It's not like we haven't had a guy that's able to win the biggest prize before. But like you said, I mean, Ed Snyder's a guy that wants to win now, and if he feels he has an opportunity to go out and get a coach of that caliber, a guy that can really maybe turn this team around, then I wouldn't be surprised.
When you bring up those accolades, it's pretty hard to say no for him. But for the team, they need to bring in more players. Just bringing in a head coach isn't going to change their issues.
I mean, I would love to see Mike Babcock here. I mean, you look at his team on the Red Wings right now, Datsuk and Zetterberg, who in their mid-30s, and the NHL is quickly turning into a younger league, bringing kids out of high school. You got South Jersey kid Johnny Gaudreau, Johnny Hockey, who's making a name for himself. But I think if Mike Babcock wants to keep a good reputation in this league, he might want to see younger talent. The Flyers, a little bit hidden this season, but I believe they have some talent they can develop with a blue line offense. So, but like you said, it's going to come with a price. Mike Babcock is going to be the highest paid NHL coach in history, I believe. So it depends if Ed Snyder opens up the checkbook, because you have Toronto Maple Leafs who are also going to be interested, and they'll have no problem with the money.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens behind the Flyers bench. But let's focus on what happened on the ice the other night as Kimmo Timonen making his return to the Wells Fargo Center. And as you can see there in the picture, it's still strange to see Timonen in a Blackhawks uniform, but as you can see there, a huge standing ovation as the Flyers played a video tribute to him during one of the first TV timeouts. He skates out on the ice, of course, gives the fans the salute. And I mean, what more can we say about this guy that we haven't already the past couple weeks? Because, of course, this is a guy who, when he had his press conference before the game at the practice center, when he was asked about his time here in Philadelphia, the man started to break down in tears because he loved playing here so much. And he said, I have nothing but good things to say about the city of Philadelphia. So even though he hasn't really done much scoring-wise with the Blackhawks, he'll probably still go on a deep playoff run with them. How cool is it to see Kimmo Timonen back on the Wells Fargo Center ice and just to get the ovation that he got?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously great to see Kimmo Timonen back in the Wells Fargo Center. I mean, it's hard to definitely see him in that Blackhawks uniform, especially them losing against the Blackhawks. I was at that game when we lost, so it's tough to see. I hate the Blackhawks have a bad place in my heart, but definitely it's great. I mean, I think when it was reported that he may get traded, I think he definitely we as fans were like, maybe we hope for him to go to a Stanley Cup run because we know this is going to be his last year.
Yeah, so it was really cool to see Kimmo Timonen on the Wells Fargo Center ice, and it was cool, even though the Flyers won that game 5-1, even though they're probably out of playoff contention. It was still cool to see number 44 back on the Wells Fargo Center ice. But now let's move on to the Philadelphia Phillies. And Steve, you brought this up a little earlier, but let's talk about that Jimmy Rollins interview with Ken Rosenthal, because he said some things that were interesting, to say the least, and have been generating some kind of different reactions with Phillies fans. First, I have a quote here about when he said, the general area, the city of Philadelphia, being blue-collar, it's not conducive for a superstar. You could be good, but you've got to be a blue-collar guy along the way. Keep your mouth shut and just go to work. Sounds like Jimmy Rollins wasn't the happiest with having to just put his head down and go to work, sort of a la his counterpart, Chase Utley. Is that a little concerning to you that he's saying that about the atmosphere, or how right or wrong do you think he may be?
No, I mean, I think he's correct in the fact that he's trying to make a point that say, in this city, we want to see guys work. We want to see guys not use their mouth, but use their skill set, whether it's on any field, whether it's baseball, football, hockey, or basketball. They want to see, us as fans want to see that you're giving all you have. And I think he's trying to say that maybe the city of Philadelphia doesn't react as well if a guy is speaking his mind and maybe has a chatter that we don't want to hear. But I mean, I don't honestly agree with that completely, because I think if your team's playing well and you're playing at a very high level, we'll still like you, because I think we've had players in the past that have maybe spoke a little bit too much, but they were playing really good and we were still on the bandwagon with them.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at Jimmy Rollins in 07, the team to beat comment. I mean, he went out and backed it up because that was the year he had 20 doubles, 20 triples, 20 homers, 20 stolen bases,
Yeah,
an MVP.
Exactly.
I mean, so, yeah, when you're playing well, we'll play along with you. But if you're like, let's say, for example, Ilya Brizgalov towards the end of his Flyers tenure saying all this crazy stuff and not producing, then obviously we're going to earn our back. So, Kevin, what do you think of at least that comment about the blue-collar nature of Philadelphia and speaking your mind?
I think he's spot on with, we want to see our players work, but I don't think that we don't like superstars. I mean, we had Terrell Owens here.
Yeah.
For the year he was here, he was pretty loved.
Yeah.
After that, when you start hearing him coming out saying things about McNabb, you know, people started disliking him more. But when he was here and he was playing hard and playing well for us, we loved him. So I agree with half his statement, the other half, not really.
Steve?
Well, Kevin, you brought up Terrell Owens, and I was actually going to mention that, is that he was a superstar. But as soon as he started opening up his mouth, like we went to the Super Bowl with him, and you know, exactly, Eagles went to the Super Bowl with him. He had a great season. As soon as he started opening up his mouth and doing push-ups and press conferences, we wanted him out. And that's just how it is in Philadelphia. And it's not just Philadelphia. It's Northeast baseball. Look at New York. Look at Boston. That's just expectations here. You're not going to open your mouth. And if you are, like comments like, we are the team to beat, yeah, back yourself up. But that's not really a comment where you're just – you could go against them if the Phillies didn't have that stretch of 5 years where they were just fantastic. But Jimmy Rollins knew that. And if you're going to say something like that in Northeast baseball, especially Philadelphia, you have to back yourself up. And you know, I completely agree with Jimmy. And I wish him the best of luck. In Los Angeles, it's definitely going to be a different atmosphere for him because he can, you know, they don't mind the trash talk. Look at Hollywood. They're all trash talk.
That and like there, he's not like the main guy either. Here, like in 07, he was the main guy. And of course, a counter argument I always have to that is too, like, what was he supposed to say to that? Because he was asked, like the question he was asked about that was, are you guys the team to beat? It's not like he said, the reporter just said, oh, hey, how do you guys, I think you're going to do? And he was like, oh, I think we're the team to beat. No, he was sort of kind of led into that
question. In all of his answers, in the press conference, I didn't see like any regret. I mean, you know, like maybe he would have changed something, but like I think it eventually took that he understood how he had to be as a player. Yeah. And then took that role on. He's the leader, and when he slacked, he was benched, and he learned his lessons. But it's definitely going to be a little different on the West Coast for him.
Yeah, you brought up when he was slacked and when he was benched. Towards the end of the interview, of course, Ken Rosenthal asked him about one of the things he's most criticized for here in Philadelphia, hustling. And he brought up the one thing he said about hitting the ball to second base. Oh, I'm gonna give it 70%, and maybe if I hit the ball the other side, I'll turn it early on. That's what bothers me about Jimmy Rollins, because, again, obviously I love what he did for this city. He's going to be a top 5 Philly in history. But when he makes the comments like that about out hustling, about how I'm going to give 70%, no, you're taught ever since T-ball to give 100% down the line to first base, no matter where the ball's hit. Steve, it looks like you want to go first here. Well, what do you think about this?
It was an interesting comparison because, like, he's treating playing in the MLB like a job, and he's like, not every player always goes 100% in this league. Even if you hit the first, obviously he's going to take 3 steps. But when he's benched, he sees other players do it, and he says, okay, that's wrong. But he even compared it to, like, even at your job, you're not doing 100% of the work you can each day. Like, you just have days like that. But, you know, obviously in Philly, we don't take that very well. But it was a good point. You know, it is. He's paid to do that, and we don't always do 100% of what we can be doing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Tommy, what do you think?
I mean, in the case of Jimmy Rollins, I think over his career, we began to accept what Jimmy Rollins' type of game was. He would have those pop-ups that he always used to do, those classic Jimmy Rollins pop-up. He would look at it, flip his bat, and just jog down the base. And sometimes the guy would drop it, and then you would have Charlie Manuel. In those days when Charlie Manuel was with the Phillies, he would bench him. He would come out and was like, what are you doing, Jimmy? You got to run those out. Because it would turn out he could have got the second on the play if he just would have ran. But, I mean, that's kind of what we accepted of Jimmy Rollins. I think that's the kind of the mix with the good and the bad of his career is that when he had that MVP year, we were like, wow, Jimmy Rollins is the best. And when he did it was a little rough those last couple years. But nonetheless, Jimmy Rollins is all-time one of the best Phillies we've ever had.
Yeah, now let's look to the current Philadelphia Phillies team. Of course, Jimmy Rollins now with the Dodgers. And let's look at the back end of the bullpen and how they've been faring in spring training, because they haven't been too bad, really. 2.25 ERA for Papelbon with 4 strikeouts. For Giles, 1.35 ERA, 9 strikeouts. And Diekman, the worst of the 3, but still, it's spring training, a 3.86 ERA with 7 strikeouts. I mean, that's a silver lining with this Phillies team, the team that's projected to lose 90 games this season. How good is it to see that kind of silver lining with the back end of the bullpen, which was a strength for this team last season, still in spring, for the most part, looking pretty good right now?
No, it's great to see it. Obviously, that was the one bright spot at the end of last year that we saw was like, wow, this bullpen could really come together. And we started seeing the guys like Diekman and Giles really show it at the tail end of last year. And I think it's the one thing we can look forward to this season is like we're going to have some guys in the back end of that bullpen that can really maybe hold a lead if we get one this year.
Yeah, it's really nice to see, especially after a couple years where the starters were the only thing we had. But the 2 players I really like seeing is Diekman and Giles. Both their strikeout numbers are pretty high, and that both of those players would mainly take over for the trade that could happen if you want to get rid of and find someone to unload Papelbon to.
Yeah, I was going to say if somebody wants him. Steve, how good is it to see the bullpen doing so well?
This is the silver lining of the season. Along with the 3 you showed in the graphic, you have Andy Oliver, who's on a Rule 5 status, but he's proven himself through 5 games. In the back end of the bullpen, he's pitching. You have Jimar Gomez, who we got from Pittsburgh, hasn't given up a run in 7 games he's played. And you also have, Luis Garcia, who also hasn't given up a run. So the Phillies have options and young options is what to see. So absolutely, this is something to watch this season.
Yeah, I'm glad there's something with this Phillies team to look at right now. But speaking of something to look at, there's a player that's been turning heads who may not be the most familiar name. Let's look at the graphic. Odubel Herrera. That's right, Odubel Herrera. He is a Rule 5 draft pick from the Rangers, and let's see his stats. A 3.75 batting average, but only 1 extra base hit and a double, 5 stolen bases, 3 RBI, and he scored 7 runs. Now, I mean, a Rule 5 draft pick, so of course he's got to stay up with the big club for a while, because if he wants to get sit down, he's got to go through waivers and all that jazz. But so far, this looks like a good move, but again, it's only spring training. So it's kind of a 2-part question. 1, do you like what you're seeing? And 2, how much value do you put on spring training stats? Because we've seen a couple years ago when like Don Brown would have good springs, and I mean, we've seen what Don Brown has turned into. So how much value do you put on spring training stats, and how good do you think Herrera could be for the Phillies?
I'm not a guy that really puts a lot of kind of stuff behind the spring training stats, but it's good to see a guy stepping up, a guy that we definitely need. Maybe help out in our outfield right now. They're deciding maybe going into the regular season we mix around him and Revere in left and center field. Maybe mix them around, and but it's definitely nice to see a guy stepping up. But it is spring training. We got to kind of put the stop brakes on a little bit because we don't know. We don't really know this guy that well. He's a young kid, still only like 24, 25 years old. But hopefully he can really help us out this year because we're definitely going to need some bats. And whether he's a power hitter or not, we're definitely going to need something.
Kevin, is this guy going to turn into Rule 5 draft pick Shane Victorino or Rule 5 draft pick Michael Martinez?
Well, definitely I'm hoping for Victorino. I mean, Victorino was a great player for the Phillies, but Odubel's played pretty good for the Phillies this spring. And I don't really know how much you can put on it because it is still the spring, but it's nice to see a guy get his feet wet maybe with the new club and play confidently for this team and hopefully continue to play this way after opening day.
All right, well, we'll see how Herrera does the rest of spring training, and we'll see how he does on the big league roster because, again, he's a Rule 5 draft pick, so it'll be interesting to see where he plays and how he does once the games matter in April. But now we move on real quick to the Philadelphia Eagles, who mainly we're going to talk about, well, people talking today with the Birds, with Jeffrey Lurie and Chip Kelly, both having press conferences this past week with the meetings. Jeffrey Lurie saying that Howie Roseman got removed from his GM position because, quote, Chip Kelly wanted a football guy. What does this say about the relationship between Chip Kelly and Howie Roseman? I mean, that pretty much just puts that to bed as a contentious relationship, huh?
Yeah. Some of the dialogue that came out of these meetings, these press conferences, whatever you want to call them, it was kind of interesting to hear. I mean, when you kind of just, I felt like there was a lot of bashing of Howie Roseman. It's just still surprising that he's like on the front office team. So it's very interesting what's going on with the Eagles front office right now. And you really, as an Eagles fan, you just hope that they can just kind of put this together. They're saying the draft is where they're going to make their next move, and hopefully they can really just put a solid draft together.
Yeah, as if it wasn't evident enough that Chip Kelly and Howard Roseman didn't like each other, then Lurie comes out and says this. And like Tommy said, there was other statements that Kelly and Lurie were going clearly
Chip
at
Kelly pinned
Howie
Marcus Smith
Roseman.
on Howie Roseman
exactly.
directly.
And, like, there's really nothing to say except for they don't get along.
Yeah, like to Tommy's point, like why is Howie Roseman
Yeah,
still
still
on this?
here.
I don't know. It's
Still
like
here.
It's like he's the quote-unquote nerd that's getting picked on
Yeah,
right now by
exactly.
the jocks. Steve, what do you think
Yeah,
about
just
this?
imagine this relationship where like Chip and Howie just have never said a word to each other, and like all the information they have between each other is looking at Eagles Insider on Twitter. But definitely, we had to expect that there was going to be some front office changes. But I like the promotion by demotion line because that's really what it was. But a football guy is nice, so I'm not complaining.
Oh yeah, I mean Ed, I think his last name is Mankiewicz. He's a LaSalle alum, so I should really know how to pronounce his name. But let's face it, he's a Chip Kelly puppet because Chip Kelly is vice president of player personnel. So we know that this is Chip calling the shots here because again, he basically is second in command to Jeffrey Lurie, or maybe he's first in command because it seemed like Chip Kelly. This almost sounds like Chip went into Jeffrey Lurie's office one day and was like, "Oh yeah, I want a football guy here instead of this guy," or I'm walking, and Jeffrey Lurie's like, "Oh yeah, okay, sure, of course." So I don't know. It seems kind of interesting that Chip is just calling the shots like that. So
I don't know,
Steve, what do you think?
He has, look at his success at Alabama, bringing in the top recruiting classes each year, and
Yeah.
I'm sure he has, plenty under his belt with player evaluation. So I don't see why not Chip would be open to his opinion on these players.
Yeah.
I don't
Tommy?
know. I think that Jeffrey Lurie is like Chip Kelly's puppet right now. That's right.
Yeah.
Because it's just like the stuff that Jeffrey Lurie was saying was just like, wow, he's the greatest. It's like we haven't done anything. We didn't make the playoffs. Like I don't understand. Like I don't care. Like maybe Howie Roseman was head of the draft last year, but I mean Chip Kelly obviously had some input. There's no way you didn't have Chip Kelly's input in some of the players. That just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know. I think it's a lot of hope is going into the Chip Kelly kind of just the history behind him, but I haven't seen the results yet. And he's been 2 years. He's demoted in terms of playoffs. He made the playoffs his first year. Now he didn't. I mean, I really don't know what they're trying to do. I kind of maybe a little bit here and there. It looks maybe the light is kind of see with the moves they made at running back, but even then, there's still a lot of question marks to be right
So then let me bring this into the picture. How many years do you think it'll be? I think he has about 3 years left on his deal. But obviously, firing's going to happen at any time before he either wins a Super Bowl or gets fired. Because if I'm Jeffrey Lurie, this is what I'm thinking. All right, you've got your guys. You kept telling me you want to win with your guys and you can win best with your guys. Well, now you have your guys. So now, unless he makes the NFC Championship in the next 2 years, I think he's gone.
Yeah.
Just because, I don't know, it just seems like, all right, you've got your guys now. It's time to put up or shut up. What do you think, Tommy?
I think this year he has to win a playoff game. Like I think that's he has to be in the second round of playoffs, or it's just like what were you doing? Because you haven't improved at all. So it's like you have to win one playoff game this year, and I think I'll be happy for where they've come this year, in my opinion.
I feel like Laurie's looking at it, and what he wants to see is the improvement over a longer period of time. We really don't know where this team's going. Like they could still maybe land Mariota, and if that's the case, you can look at it a different way. But if you get Bradford and injuries plague him, then you're looking at Sanchez, and maybe he's getting fired.
Steve, really quick, what do you think?
He's just taking his chips.
Putting them all in,
in.
baby.
No, this is an all or nothing risk. I mean, but he has a lot to prove. But to be honest, the first year he came into the league, the NFC East wasn't great. So as much as it was a new thing the league saw, that gave a lot of help to the Eagles making the playoffs. Then you had the Cowboys, who were a better team last year, and that challenged us, and we missed. So he had to make these moves. We don't have a defense, so open up the cap, give the defense
I still don't
money.
think we have a defense yet.
We'll see. We'll see what's happening with this team over the next couple of years. Again, it's not even draft day yet, so we'll get there. We'll get there. But now it's time for Fast Five. That's what we're getting to now. So let's start with Tommy McIntyre. Could Nerlens Noel win Rookie of the Year?
I think it's very possible for him to win it, but I think Andrew Wiggins right now with his averages and these voters love points per game, and I think Wiggins right now is averaging a little over 15 points per game. But Noel's March has been ridiculous, so I think he's really making this late season push right now.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. All right, Steve, how damaged is your NCAA bracket? And be honest. This is the Fast Five, though.
Yeah, it's not great, but I have 3 teams left in my Final Four, so I still have some hope.
There you go.
You still have your champion left, right?
Yeah, I still have my champion, Freddie Kaminsky, going to take Wisconsin.
Oh, boy. Let's see what happens in the Sweet 16. All right. Kevin, besides Nerlens Noel, who's the Sixers MVP this year?
Brett Brown.
I guess Sam
yeah.
Hinkie?
Yeah,
Brett
Sam
Brown's
Hinkie. Yeah,
Brett Brown's
I mean-
probably that. Covington.
Yes.
Or
Covington's-
Jeremy Grant off the.
Kevington's
yeah,
nice.
Yeah,
one of those two as a player.
that's probably the smart answer.
6 answers.
Well, I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of
I mean, it could
choices.
work.
I mean,
Tommy, how damaged is your bracket?
it's very damaged. I had Villanova in the championship.
Dude,
I mean,
you had BYU in the Sweet 16. They
yeah.
lost their playing
Well,
game.
at least I did mine before the first 4 games. But yeah, my bracket. I still have Kentucky winning it all, and I still got. I think I still got Gonzaga. I still have
Yes.
Wisconsin.
That's what I have,
So,
too.
that's,
So.
I have three Final Four teams.
San Diego State losing to Duke killed me. All right, final question. Another college basketball question. Steve, you got the Fighting Irish tie on again. How far do you think this Notre Dame team can go?
I have them in the Elite 8. I think they can shock the Shockers tonight against Wichita State, but Kentucky is a force to be reckoned with. That it'll be close, but I think Kentucky wins. So Elite 8, I have them peaking.
Real quick before I wrap the show up, how much did you really want to say shock the Shockers?
A
How
lot.
happy were you to say that?
A lot.
All right, well, with that in mind, that does it for us this week on Sports Talk Philadelphia. But of course, as always, keep up with us on social media. You can hit us up on Facebook, facebook.com/SportsTalkPhiladelphia, Twitter. You can see all our full episodes on YouTube. Hit us up everywhere. We'll respond and we'll love the feedback. But that does it for our show here today. For Steve, for Kevin, and for Tommy, I'm Tyler Harper. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.
That was fun.
Shot the shot.
Shock the Shockers.
I was
I
gonna
had to
say
say it.
clever.
I just thought.